Hey there, welcome to Blockhead, the Peanuts tribute podcast from a cartoonist's point of view. My name is Jeff Grogan, and I will be your host for the next few minutes to talk about Peanuts, Charles Schulz, and all things Charlie Brown, Linus, Lucy, and Snoopy too. So sit back and enjoy. Hey there, Blockhead listeners. Welcome to a very special episode of the podcast. Today we have not one, but two guests on the show, and very special guests indeed. Khalid Birdsong of Little Fried Chicken and Sushi on GoComics.com, and Ray Billingsley, of course, of the syndicated comic strip Curtis, and one of this podcast's very, very favorite comic strips out in the world today. This is a very unique and special episode indeed. We've come together to talk about comics, of course, and that means Curtis and Little Fried Chicken and Sushi, and also the experience of black cartoonists in a medium wherein their voices have historically been marginalized. But we've also come together to talk about the events of the last few weeks, specifically the murder of George Floyd and the eruption of protests across the globe in the weeks since. This feels like an historic moment in which we've perhaps, hopefully, turned a corner in the struggle for change. Ray, Khalid, and I have a frank discussion about these events, about racism, about the world we live in, as well as comics and how cartoonists respond to the issues of the day. So, without further ado, Ray Billingsley, Khalid Birdsong, and myself in conversation.
It's great to actually really connect here. Thank you, Jeff.
It's been quite a while for Khalid and I.
Yep.
So, this is the first time I'm hearing his voice.
That's right. Yeah, it's like I've heard Ray on interviews and, of course, on Blockhead. So this is exciting.
Well, it's great for me, too. I'm so excited, and it's so cool. I didn't know you guys knew each other, and it's just cool that it worked out that way. And it's great to be able to, bring you together, I guess, virtually anyway, to talk to
Jeff, one another. Jeff, you know the old stereotype, right? Blacks, we all know each other.
Right, exactly. It's I didn't really have any idea, so this is great. And what's even cooler, I guess, Khalid mentioned that he had written you a letter years and years ago when he first started out.
That's right. Well, actually it was in high school where, it was my mother who always kind of encouraged communicating and everything. And when I was reading Curtis in the paper and that was it, having a black male character in a comic strip, and it was so exciting. And she was like, "Oh, you should just write him, and ask him for advice." And of course, as a teenager, I think I was maybe in 10th grade or something, and I was like, "Oh, it's no way he's going to write back." And so, okay, I'll do it. And he did, and then gave me a signed sketch of Curtis and signed it and everything. And I still have that signed sketch up in my studio. I framed it, and it's just inspiring. And then later I learned that that's what Ray does for a lot of great cartoonists. And so I'm just very thankful for everything you've done, Ray. And thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Also, thank you for making me feel old. Back in high school, hopefully you just left high school a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. That's it.
But I've never been the type not to answer people, and I know that's actually a bad thing of a lot of people. You should want to inspire other people or just say hello. I already understand that a lot of people, just to write me, they're feeling nervous. Right. So the last thing I want to do is disappoint them. That's just the sort of person I am. I'm already behind in a lot of fan letters and all, but I'll get to them. I like to do it all personally. I just can't understand people who never return a reader's letters. I just don't get it.
Right.
That's a hallmark of your work and your attitude towards the work in general, right, Ray? I mean, you do everything yourself. It's not
Right.
like you're relying on assistants to do. You don't
Right.
have an administrative assistant answering your fan mail.
No, none at all. None. I think actually I'm a little bit too eccentric to work with because I can't just get up and say, okay, 9 o'clock, it's time to work. It doesn't work that way. I might start work at 2 o'clock in the morning and go on till 5, take a nap, get up at 8, do it all, do some more of it. The art and whatever I do related to art, it has to speak to me. It hits me when it hits me.
Oh, that's amazing that you can do that, and it's good to know the process, because I always wonder about that with cartoonists. For me, it's the early morning, and so I have a family, and it's just finding the time right now can be hard. I used to be the late night guy that would stay up and do something similar to you, but once I had a kid, it was kind of like, it's easier for me to get up, and then I'm fresh in the morning, and so I'm usually up around 4:30 or 5, and I put in my time for art and cartooning, and I just kind of have to make it happen. Sometimes that means looking at comics or reading other comic strips, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just staring at the wall, but
Oh yeah.
you know, and so I just kind of get into that and use the time, and yeah, and it's great. And then when I'm done, the rest of the day I'm kind of on a natural high, because hey, I got my comic strip done, or I did some writing for this, and so
Right.
it's the work right now, but who knows how it may change in the future.
Once he becomes an empty nester, everything will change.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
bet.
I had 3 kids around. They're all grown and they're all with their own families and they're out of state. So basically, I am an empty nester, and I mean, I can do that. That's why it gives me the freedom to do this stuff when I want to. In the earlier years, yeah, I had a real schedule to deal with, going to PTA meetings, all that stuff. I did the whole parent thing, and I raised actually my kids alone. So it was just me and the strip.
Really?
But
Huh.
yeah, yeah, it was a tough road. I've been down a lot of tough roads doing these comic strips.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about your family really that much, Ray, the last time you were on, and so it's really interesting to hear that. It certainly does make a difference in your ability to work whenever you want to work. I just read Khalid's blog post about, and it was interesting because there's a kind of disciplined approach that you put forth in that blog post, Khalid, about, getting up in the morning and getting something done. And I kind of responded to that because I work pretty much, I'm a morning person, so I work pretty much in the morning also. Although you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and for me, morning is like 6, 7 o'clock. And I noticed you were like active on Instagram at like, I don't know when. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is up, like, he's up at the crack of dawn or before.
Yeah, it's really great.
Now, I have to tell you, one of the things about children and all that, first of all, my kids don't really care much for what I do. You know,
Hmm.
it's just plain normal. So they went through the stage where it was sort of embarrassing for them. And it's only like my middle son now who is sort of interested in cartooning. The oldest one, and I have a daughter who is interested in writing. So I'm trying to help her put together a little book, actually a serious dramatic book. But uh, I don't know. It's been different with these 3 kids. They're just very different people, and I know they like to be extremely private, and they know how I live my life. Uh, Most of my life, I've been doing some interview or something like that, so I've been very public. And the family life, I just sort of keep more private.
Do you think that being a cartoonist, did it help with raising kids? And if you were raising them on your own, did it give you the flexibility to kind of do all of that, or did you think it
Well,
made it harder? Or
let me tell you this one thing. By being like a stay-at-home father, uh, they really didn't get into much trouble.
hmm,
None of them did drugs because, I mean, I'm always home. So it's not like they were able to sneak off and come back and me not notice and, punish them if they did anything wrong. Like I said, I went to PTA meetings and, most times when you're a kid, the last person you wanted to see at your school was your father.
That's right.
You could deal with your mother going, but not your father.
Right.
So pretty much, they stayed in line and they gave me the room. We had our dinners every night, so it was regular family stuff. But after that, I would, just dive back into my work, and they knew I was working, so they would always give me that space.
Right.
Ray, you've always been, I mean, through most of your adult life, then you've been a syndicated cartoonist, and that's been your sole occupation, correct?
Right. Right.
Is that correct? And Khalid, are you're working right now as well as being a cartoonist, right? Are you teaching?
I do a combination of things. Yeah, most of my career has been in either kind of freelance illustration, education, art teaching, and just kind of making comics independently. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I also kind of do some writing, blog writing, business writing, that sort of thing. Right now, I'm kind of going back into the teaching side and art teaching and yeah, making my comics. I mean, teaching, as you know, Jeff, I mean, it's really great for if you have something on the side that you enjoy doing, because usually you get the summers, and that's when I do a lot of my cartooning and serious work there, and even the hours, like I have pretty decent hours, and I have kind of set vacations that I know are going to come up, and like, okay, this is spring break, so now I'm going to get this many comic strips done and try to get a buffer and that sort of thing. So it is good for that, and so most of my career, yeah, has been a kind of a combination of all of those.
Uh-huh. And so, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that too. I mean, you've been posting now, not every day like Ray posts, has to, as a syndicated strip, has to be up every day, but still you've got a deadline that you give yourself. So it's combining that with the teaching can be difficult. One of the things I was going to point out is that's kind of interesting is, and it's not true of a lot of the strips that I've been reading. A lot of strips sort of haven't been dealing with the coronavirus, but both of you guys have dealt with it pretty straightforwardly in the last couple of months, and what people have had to go through. Was that challenging? Well, it must have been challenging because you were working pretty much as everything was unfolding. You didn't have much of a much leeway in terms of time.
Now, I know in my case, what makes it really rough is this deadline schedule. We have to stay weeks ahead.
Yeah.
So I can't really respond to things right away as I want to. And I have to actually weave them into a script sort of naturally. I don't want it to look like I've taken a sudden curve. It goes in naturally. So I think with me, the coronavirus was going on for a couple of weeks before I actually had a chance to get into it. And then I just got deeper and deeper. And it's a subject that I just couldn't pass up. It was affecting so many people. I just couldn't let it go past. And it's not to say that every cartoonist has to do it, because their mind has to be geared for doing topical subjects. You get a lot of scripts that they just do gags and that's it. But Curtis wasn't one of those type of strips. I like doing topical situation sort of story arcs. It actually it makes me work harder as a writer.
And it is one of the things that's remarkable about Curtis. It's both, there are times when it is kind of a kid gag strip, and then there are times when it really touches on real world issues like the coronavirus. And I think that makes it unique.
I was lucky because of the syndicate let me do just about anything I want. And see, that's not often the case. If you're sold for doing one thing, they sort of want to keep you at that. But I had told them years ago when I first came on, this is how my mind went. I mean, after so many years of doing strips and freelancing and all that stuff, my mind isn't geared to just one thing. It bounces around. It experiments. So at least they gave me the opportunity to do that.
That's great. That's amazing. I made a decision a few years ago to actually start talking about any things that are going on in the world for a while there, especially with fried chicken and sushi. I really wanted to keep it kind of in its own world, timeless, and not really comment on anything. And then I said, well, let me kind of try something different. And yeah, I just started trying to comment, even if it's not direct. I said, well, can I be clever with it? Can I hint at something and not really address it directly, but everyone knows what I'm talking about? And so this, even though it's been really hard with the coronavirus, with everything going on, just internationally, and the fact that it was a big deal in Japan where the family lives, I thought this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about this and keep the family at home. And I think it's really worked out pretty well.
How I'm not actually all that familiar with how it impacted Japan and how it was dealt with in Japan. Was there lockdown in the same way there was in the United States, or did they take a stricter attitude towards it? Did they control it more successfully than we have here in the United States? Or
they had I guess it was I don't know if you'd say a lockdown for work. As far as people, you try to keep people inside and not really go out much, and everyone wears a mask. But as far as completely closing all of businesses and doing that, they didn't really do that. I think it was hard. The economy just wouldn't be able to take it in Japan. So they did close the schools down. Mm-hmm. They closed the schools down for I don't know if it was a month or two, but their schools are back open and kids are going. But I think that there, in Asia, people are more accustomed to wearing masks and going out if they're sick, or just as a courtesy. You wear a mask to kind of not spread your germs to someone else. Maybe you're riding on trains, or you're, in close proximity to everyone, and so you're careful. Here in America, it's kind of a relatively new thing. So I think wearing masks is something that everyone can easily get into and do. But yeah, it's been hard. I think things are getting better over there now, and they're slowly coming back to life. But yeah, a lot of people, some businesses, you could stay home, and some you had to come in. It was not a solid 100% lockdown.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to think of. I know that at least from what I've read, in China and in Korea, in particular in Korea, there was a fairly disciplined approach to lockdown, and they seem to have gotten a handle on it. But I'm not current with what's going on right now exactly, and whether there's been spikes or not. But this issue raises the question, and it sort of precipitates our meeting here today in a way, and that is that Curtis deals with some real life issues. Khalid, your strip is now dealing with coronavirus in a way, and although your family is located in Japan, I think the issues we're going through right now with Black Lives Matter and the death of the murder of George Floyd and the aftermath and the response to that, is that something that you guys feel that you're going to be dealing with in your comics in the next, in the near future?
Khalid, you want to do that first?
Sure. I think that I want to talk about things that are going on, but I already kind of do that in some ways, just at a distance. And I actually reposted a comic strip about that, where the teacher at school in Japan is kind of asking, what do you think about America, kids? What do you think of because Japan is known for this, and what do you think? And then they're like, oh, Hollywood is America, and oh, fancy cars. And then Carl, the black kid, is like racism. And it's just that sometimes I bring those things up, and so I've done that kind of throughout the strip. So I'll talk about it a little, but I don't know how deep I'm going to go yet. It just kind of depends. I'm definitely going to bring up certain points, but I'm just not sure how. And that's what's kind of exciting about cartooning, is like, well, I have to say something, and I don't know. They're in Japan, and so how is that going to affect them? And so I'm not sure how it's going to weave in there, but trust me, it will show up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, in my case, Curtis, lives in the city here in the U.S. In
Right.
any city, might say, any big city, Detroit, Philly, New York, and although I've really wanted to say things about policemen, I've sort of held back from doing it. Uh, there's another cartoonist by the name of Rob Armstrong who does a
Yep.
strip called Jumpstart,
Yep.
and his is about a policeman. And see, it's sort of like a unwritten law among us cartoonists to not like dwell on each other's topics. I actually count on him to make more statements about the policeman. And a main reason why I don't do things about police because I did live in New York for a number of years, and I had a lot of personal problems with them. So I've sort of strayed away from doing them because I don't want to sound vindictive or angry at them. Uh, I've had a couple of shakedowns with policemen, and it really wasn't a good time.
And as a matter of fact, I mean, in some sense, the post you put up on Instagram about one of those experiences precipitated this getting together here today, because you talked quite frankly about being stopped on your way up to visit your mom.
Right. And there was no reason. There was no
Right.
reason for it. I happened to be. I remember very well. I was living on 79th Street, between First and Second Avenue, which is supposed to be sort of a quiet area. A little well-to-do. I went there because I needed the peace and quiet. I didn't want people to bother me. And it being New York, I didn't have a car, so and I didn't ride the subways. Being over on the east side, the subway really isn't that great. So I would always hire a car. And
Mhm.
I got to the point where I would get the same car and the same driver, and he knew where I was going. I was headed uptown to see my mother. And this one time, an unmarked car pulled us over. And, these three guys jumped out. And I was with a friend of mine. We were both going up. And all of a sudden, my driver, he got really scared. And, he pulled over. These guys get out and they say, put your hands on the car, spread them. And I said, no. And he said, put your hands on the car. And I yelled at him. I said, no. And I said, I know who you are. You have no badges. You haven't identified yourself. I have no idea who you are. You might be three guys just wanting to feel us up.
Man.
So I looked over towards my buddy, and he was already spread out on the car. And I refused to do it. So they started asking me for ID, and I gave them my wallet. One guy started fumbling through it. The other guy was up in my face, just breathing hard, as if he wanted to do something. And one of the guys read my name out on my ID, and he said, "Ray Billingsley, Ray Billingsley, where do I know that name from?" And I said, "You must like cartoons." And he said, "Oh yeah, you're the guy that draw Curtis. You draw Curtis." They actually asked me if Curtis and Michelle was going to get together. I said, "You got to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. You stopped me like this, and now you're talking like a fan."
God.
So, but because of that, they let us go. It de-escalated just like that. And I mean, there was one of the cops that was up in my face. He looked like he wanted to go to blows. I mean, he was actually just puffing and blowing right in my face. And see, I'm from Harlem too. I'm not really that quick to back down, which is why I was yelling at him. I won't do it. I won't do it. There was no reason to. Oh, and I do study things like the law. I don't just do cartoons. I do a lot of reading, so I know what my rights were. And you can't just stop someone because of no reason. You gotta have a reason to stop them, and they gave us nothing. So I told them, "Have a nice day," and we drove off. And my driver, he was shaking. He had told me he had never seen anyone do that before, and the guy just had sweat rolling down because he was so scared. That's how nervous they made him that quickly.
Oh.
And
But see, that's the reason why I don't really have police in the Strip at all. I think throughout Curtis's run, I don't think I've drawn the police not once.
I don't recall seeing police in at
Okay.
all. Yeah, which is interesting. How would you deal with them if you were to introduce them in the Strip? The reality of it is really so terrible and so frightening. And I mean, from my position as a white guy, I can't possibly understand what you go through when you interact with the police. I mean, I don't like interacting with the police, but I know that I'm not going to be tasered. I'm not going to be knocked on the ground senseless. That experience is not going to happen to me. And, I can't imagine how one grapples with that every time one leaves the house, or when one has children and you're raising your child and you don't know what's going to happen to them when they walk out of the door, because two guys in a truck are going to chase them down when they're going for a jog or something.
You're right about that. My middle son, he called me one time. He was outside. He said, "Dad, I just had a run-in with the cops." And I said, I hope you did what I told you to, and you're polite. You just go ahead with what's happening. And he said that they had a little argument, some words, and he spit on his car. And I said, "Man, do not do that.
Do not do that.
Just answer their questions. If you're not doing anything, most likely they'll just let you go."
Mm-hmm.
And thank goodness it didn't go any further than that. But yeah, my kids were also subject to that sort of thing. My oldest boy, he's sort of a homebody, so he just went to school. He came home. He had little friends, so I didn't really worry about him. The middle boy, he was outgoing and very social, so he's the one I had to worry about more.
Yeah, it's good to hear that, Ray, because I can totally relate that idea of, you go out and you have to be very, very careful. And then the times that I've been pulled over by the police, it's a lot of, okay, just being careful, being polite, but also telling them what you're doing, speaking and communicating. It's like I put my hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2. And then if I go and get my license and registration, I tell them as I'm going into the glove compartment to get my license and registration. And then you're just careful with it all. And so it can be scary, but it's just that whole thing of realizing that I'm going to do everything I can to make this as peaceful and safe as possible. But you still never know.
Well, and that seems to be the case even when, I was listening to Keith Knight do a talk last night at the Billy Ireland Museum. There was a virtual discussion around these issues and his work as a cartoonist. And he's a great
his work.
Yeah, me too. He's just fantastic. And, it comes to mind as, among the things that white people will say, when they respond to these things, you read about these stories, if you just act this way, the cops will leave you alone. And that is just not always the case. I mean, if you follow these protocols, right, the cops will behave a certain way. Well, you look at what happened to Philando Castile or, Breonna Taylor or people who are not doing anything. And Philando Castile was trying to talk to the police officer and say, look, this is the situation, and it didn't matter.
Breonna was asleep.
She was asleep.
She was asleep. There was a little boy, 12 years old, playing with a water gun, and he got gunned down.
Yes. There's one terrible story after another. Ayanna Jones was a 7-year-old child. The police were raiding the apartment for one reason or another, and a 7-year-old child is hit by a stray bullet, and in her grandmother's arms. And I mean, it's one terrible story after another. And in some sense, it doesn't matter in these circumstances. It doesn't matter whether you are, following the protocols or trying to not not to anger the police or whatever. I mean, George Floyd, I mean, this is one of the things that kills me, and I think everybody responded to when you watch that terrible, terrible video of George Floyd's death.
Yes.
George Floyd was not resisting arrest. George Floyd
not at all.
Not at all. And, when his words echo in my head over and over again, and I'm certain that this is true for everybody who's seen that video. Yep. He knew. I mean, he knew his life was in the balance. He knew that, and any black person who's encountering the police in that circumstance, you just don't know how it's going to go. And when you look at that video of George Floyd, it's so apparent that he knew his life was in the balance. And
but don't you know, that's why he cried out for his mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Most black men, anyway, if something terrible is going on, first person we call on is our mother. Our mother is our most nurturing thing. If it's getting worse than that, next name you'll hear out of our mouth is Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's true.
But mom comes first. And then to find out that his mother was dead for a couple of years prior, he knew things, weren't going to turn out well.
He did.
The bad thing about these experiences, when we saw Rodney King get beat up and it was on camera, you thought there'd be some sort of change. Now they don't even care. They look at the camera while they're doing it, and it's no problem. They still continue on with this behavior.
And that is true. It seems like so many of these instances that have been videoed by passersby or those people beside, they're videoing the cops in these actions, and they continue without concern and without the sense that there's any ramifications for what they're doing. And I think that is another thing about the George Floyd video that is just so shocking, is that police officer with his knee on his neck was impassive. There was no emotion whatsoever on that man's face at all. Right. And there were people, and as you watch it, you become one of those people, those standers-by, pleading with him to take his knee off George Floyd's neck, and he just does not respond at all.
Right. Do you see also, even with the uniformed policemen that have the helmets on, wearing all black, these guys almost look like Darth Vader's arms.
They do.
You can't see their faces, which makes them all the more threatening. If you can't see a person's face and they're wearing all black, it's disturbing. When I see them standing in a line and they're all holding their batons, it's downright spooky. Now, I happened to go down to one of the marches here in New York because I just wanted to be a part of it. I just wanted to see what it was like. And it was very peaceful. Once again, talking about age, I think I was one of the older people who was in my area because they were all kids. And after a while, I had to stop walking and go back home. I couldn't take all the walking. But I did see policemen, and they did not speak. They didn't do anything. It was like looking at wooden soldiers.
There is that kind of impassive, emotionless quality to these kind of SWAT teams or these riot police, and until they start pushing forward like they did in Washington, in Lafayette Square,
right?
That whole thing, and or the guy in Buffalo or whatever, you just see these guys attacking. Once they get moving, that's when all hell breaks loose. And,
right. It's like locusts.
Yeah. And it's just it's unbelievable, I mean, the whole call for defund the police, people on the right are taking that and utilizing it as just pointing to an idea about extremism, but that's not what it means. What it means is defund the police in the way we've defunded education and all these other things, and reallocate the funds. But it also means let's take away the riot gear, the military equipment, because how did we get that attitude that the police, who are supposed to be the servants of the public, are all of a sudden this armed militia that are supposed to quarantine and corral people and um, impose force upon them in a militaristic way. It's just it's
Well,
a
this leads to the argument, Jeff, of what their stance was for years and years.
Mhm.
Now, my family is from the South, and we were told at a very young age not to go to the police. So
Uh,
once we were in New York, it was the same thing. If you have problems, don't go to the police because the police, as history shows, has never been on the black person's side. Never. Who were the ones that put the hoses on us? Not Ma and Pa Kettle. They were cops.
yeah.
right.
So this is the way it's been for black folk all the time. Uh, you get those stray ones that walk the beat and they got to know the kids and the neighbors and all that. They would go and talk. But I know I've never seen one. I've
Mhm.
never seen one of them.
Mm-hmm. Keith Knight was saying last night, one of the things he pointed out was that the police, as we know them, derived from poor people who were hired by rich people in the South after slavery ended, or actually during slavery, to chase down runaway slaves.
Right.
And the police grew out of this idea, and he was making the connection between the word officer and overseer.
Yeah.
And that was something, again, that's missing from my education.
Yeah, let me speak to that because I mean, kind of continuing on what Ray was saying. I mean, yeah, this is nothing new, and even for me, I have a friend who was shot and killed by the police,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was mistaken identity. They thought he was a drug dealer who fit the description and followed him, and we don't know what really happened. We just know what they said, that he tried to attack them or something like that. But I'm sure that wasn't true. I mean, he's a friend, college educated brother, and never would do anything like that. And the only thing is, this was 15 years ago.
Mm.
15 years ago, before we had social media and all of this to
Right.
to put it out there and
Right.
talk about it and film it and everything like that. And it was so crazy because you hear about these things happening, and I was raised to be careful, but then something like that happening is hard. And so I told my father about it, and of course he was, I'm so sorry, son. I mean, I know this is hard. And then he said, but welcome to being a black man in America, son.
Mm.
And I got chills up and down my spine, and it was I know it was hard for him to say, but it was what I needed to hear. Of like, this is a part of it. And yeah, it's just so this is not a new thing. And so I just, yeah, seeing this go on is, yeah, this is what it is.
We all actually have to grow up under this sort of rule. All of us know it. I think only Michael Jackson and his brothers probably didn't know it, but just
Yeah,
about every other black person had to deal with them in some sort of fashion.
that's right.
And it's a sad statement, but we've done all these marching. We've we've gone into higher education. We're judges. We're on the Senate. We're governors. All that, and still very little has changed.
And you're absolutely right, and we see the evidence of it every day and all around us. I guess two questions come to mind. The first is just one of plain ignorance on my part, but so why do you think these things, even though, as you were pointing out, Ray, African Americans have become members of the judiciary and law enforcement and the Senate and the Congress and all of that, and yet things don't change, and they haven't changed, and why is that? And then the second question is, do you feel like this is, I mean, some people are saying that this is a moment where it feels different, and I know the fear, and I have this fear too, is that after this quiets down, after the protests start to mellow out a little bit over time, things will just settle back into the way they've been, and legislation or whatever may be proposed, but nothing will come of it. But does this feel different at this moment to either of you?
Oh, I don't know.
I, for one, I'm a little bit afraid. Just as you say, I'm hoping it doesn't go back. But man, as a species, seems to be creatures of habit. Mm-hmm. And it's not like they'll let up on this. It just almost feels like it'll rebound and go right back to it. But I can remember all the marching during the Vietnam War. And this sort of reminds me of the same thing. They were very passionate and they fought the police and they fought against the system and all that. But yet, very little change. The outcome wasn't a worldwide change. This feels different because it really struck the hearts of people. Just hearing that man scream and cry did a number on people. That was very much different. But I'm not sure. And I actually think one of the main things that keep the police apart from other people is basically the images that are always flashed in front of us. Those of the hard-edged black person, they're afraid of rappers, even though a whole lot of rappers are nice guys. What they're doing is an image, but they're the type that, if you grab them, they may start crying. But the police don't know that. They see the guys with gold teeth and dreads and all that, and they think that they're really terrible people.
Right.
And I can imagine that being a policeman has to be a job that you are almost afraid to do because you don't know whether or not you're coming out of it or not. So I think, for one, they just attack before anyone else can. It's not like on TV where they shoot to hurt you or they wait until the other people shoot first. They go ahead and they do it first, and that's where the disaster comes in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of that is, it comes from that fear and that needing to control. A lot of that is where it is, or just not knowing what to do or what's going to happen. But that fear is strong. And then, this idea of change. I hope that there will be changes. I think there may be some policy changes. There may be some things that happen, but do I think that it's the end of racism in America? No. Do I think that, all the problems with the police departments and cops that go on will totally end? No. But I really hope that we can make a big step from this.
Now, do you remember when Obama was elected president? We thought the same thing.
Exactly.
We said, wow, there's such great strides made. We'll never go back to, the old days and all that. And it got worse.
Yep.
People seemed to get more angry, more revolutionary.
Yes.
They thought the world would crack in half because a black man had been elected. Then when they found out it didn't crack, they really went berserk.
Right.
And that brought us to where we are right now. The distrust of black people who haven't done anything, nothing at all.
It astounds me every day when you look at the difference between this buffoon who occupies the White House now and, Barack Obama, who, is just the most, I don't know, he's the greatest president of my lifetime.
8 years, no scandal.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
He was very articulate, which I don't want to make that sound bad because we all are articulate. Okay, that's not like a special thing.
Right.
But he was able to actually give you hope.
Yes.
Yep.
His speeches made you feel hope. I don't know where the hate came in. It was probably in his name. But I mean, if his name was Mark or David or something like that, it'd have been no problem. If his name was Khalil, it would have been the same thing.
Yep, that's right.
They would have been just as angry. Daquan, things like that, they'd be upset. But if he was called Michael or Ralph or something, it might have been a whole different, Ralph Jenkins, president. Okay, it's a black name. So a lot of it goes into into names actually with our people.
I think the election of Barack Obama that you've been pointing out, Ray, was surprising to a lot of us who felt that this was a watershed moment for the United States, was the amount of hate that bubbled up after that it had been simmering there and all along and expressed in different ways, but all of a sudden it's just like rising to the top, and you see all of these people who have gathered around Trump, who are expressing this now openly and in a way that can only suggest, I think is some kind of, reaction to the election of Barack Obama and this renunciation, this, obsession that Trump has with eliminating everything that Obama did. It seems to be part of that, and of course he ran his whole political career started with the idea of the birther movement.
Right, that's right. Yep, I remember that. Yep.
Sure. and he built his base upon that set of ideas, and that all these people are out there just waiting for this guy to show up so that they could just spout their hatred, openly, it just boggles the mind, and one of the things about it is that, as you were pointing out, Khalid, it's not the end of racism, and you look forward, you look at these guys and you think about they're still there in response to the tsunami of outcry around George Floyd. They're still there, these guys, and they're still voicing their hate, and they're doing it publicly and without shame. I just saw this video of these guys reenacting the death of George Floyd in.
Oh yes.
Oh my God!
I've seen that. I've seen a lot of those also different people, mostly youngsters, and that's what's scary, because the youngsters are supposed to be the one who will enact change.
Yeah, that was very scary.
Doing this, and it makes the whole thing scary. It makes it depressing, as if there's no hope.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And and on the other hand, then we do have a worldwide outcry. And this is the spark of hope that I feel anyway, is that there was a worldwide outcry, and it's because it's not just the United States, it's every place, and all of these other countries are hitting the streets and raising their arms in protest against police violence in the United States, but everywhere, and racism and the idea that Black Lives Matter is become a worldwide phenomenon, not just a phenomenon in the United States, but the momentum that it seems to have, it gives me some sense that we are hopefully on the cusp of some kind of change. But as change doesn't happen without struggle, and that struggle, I guess, is going to continue, because hate just doesn't die easily.
Yeah, right. I hope that we were talking about the other side of young people and what they can do, but I hope that a lot of young people are seeing this and they're gonna take that and say, okay, as I grow, I'm gonna make a change, or I see that, okay, I really understand something about white privilege, or I understand what I can do to be an ally, or I'm going to make a difference. It's not going to be the same when I, get into a professional career and into the world. So I hope that there will be more young people that will take that side and really make a change in the future.
I think they will.
Yeah.
Like I tell you, when I went down into New York, there were literally thousands of people, and they were basically all young, which was great to see, because that is where if there's going to be any success for this in this United States, it's going to be because of the young people.
That's right.
Because they're going to carry it forward. They'll carry it forward.
That's right. They don't have the same hang-ups with race or sexuality,
right.
All things like that. They see the other side of. They see the absurdity to it all, and I mean, they are daring to march. They're daring to be arrested and tased and maced and all that, and they keep on going. So that shows hope. I really just hope that those of them who are of voting age, that they do come out.
Oh, I hope so too.
That's
I hope so.
We always mess up.
That's
We
right.
don't come out. There's some, for them to say, "Oh, I don't like this person, so I'm not going to vote at all." That's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just hoping that they will all come out.
Yep.
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah. Getting people to the ballot box. I know, there's a lot of cynicism about the ballot box and what we can do with the ballot box, but we can see the consequences of not going to the ballot box in what's happening in the United States now.
Right.
Trump
Right.
and Barr and the Republican majority in the Senate. I mean, those are the consequences of what happens when we don't go. And so hopefully this will result in a momentum, although, we just saw yesterday what happened in Georgia in regard
Oh
to,
yes, the
to voting.
Right.
Oh my,
Yeah.
Right.
my
All of a
God.
sudden, all the machines are broken.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. In the black community. Yep.
Yep.
Just can't get them working.
And this whole outcry against mail-in voting, or Stacey Abrams was saying her absentee ballot was messed up, so she couldn't use it. And how many people is that true?
They're trying every trick that they can think of. And the bad thing about it is now they're not even being subtle about it. It's straight up in your face, and then they tell you, "Oh no, it's not like that." Of course it is.
Right.
Of course it is. We're no fools. We see it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, just as you were saying, it's right up in your face. I mean, Trump's going to hold his first rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Juneteenth. And, what does that tell you? I mean, is that just an accident? I don't think so.
Yeah, no way.
And so there is this evil in the world, there's this force in the world that wants to stoke division and anger and violence.
This is like a bad movie that we're actually living in.
It really is. It feels like that.
Yeah, you're waiting for the credits to roll, and they're not rolling. Every day you wake up, it's something different. It's mentally exhausting.
It is. I don't want to keep bringing him up, but it's just fresh on my mind. But Keith Knight was saying last night, just there is studies have been done of the survivors of families of Auschwitz and concentration camps, and they note that there are greater risks of depression and bad self-image and all kinds of ramifications, mental health issues that arise from, and just feelings of worthlessness that come out of having been treated to that extreme kind of situation. And he said, imagine what 400 years of slavery has done to a people, and this continues yet today, trying to get through all of this. But exhaustion and being exhausted is the mildest of those, but it certainly has got to be pervasive.
But people are talking about race. People are talking about what's going on. It's uncomfortable conversations, and I think that is also important, of just getting everyone to talk about this, talk about what's hard about it, and the fact that a cartoonist like Keith Knight can get up and have a slideshow like this, and people are attending and listening to what he's saying and believing him and really kind of taking it to heart and saying, wow, like there's something real to this. I think is also powerful right now. That okay, yeah, like you can't just kind of brush us off and say, yeah, okay, whatever. No, this is real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Definitely, yes.
It's and I'm embarrassed and ashamed to admit that I have not been paying attention as closely as I should have, and that my upbringing Black history was never something that was taught to me as a kid growing up. It was marginalized. My experience of it is obviously been late and secondhand. And it's the kind of thing where it's. Keith Knight was saying again last night, that the change has to come in the white community. It's like there has to be a reckoning among white people that this has got to stop.
Right.
that it's not the change in attitude, and the change is not a black problem, it's a white problem. You know,
Right.
it's like white people there has to be a consciousness raising. This seems to be a moment of consciousness raising among white people.
Yes,
And,
it does.
you know, and hopefully the impact is profound enough that it will be transformative. I hope that it is, it shook me to my core, what's been going on. Not just, George Floyd, but everything that happened in the weeks prior to that. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and then, the young man's name, the bird watcher in Central Park.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, me too.
All
Yep.
all of that hit all at once, and then George Floyd's death on top of that. It was just a tsunami of events that were inescapable. And,
Yeah, you can't ignore them. That's true.
And,
Yeah.
and Jeff, I got to tell you, those are the things that were reported.
yes.
Right. Exactly. That's my point. Yeah.
There's a lot that isn't reported, which is why we as blacks, we're almost numb to this because this is usual. This is normal.
You don't always hear about it.
And here's the thing that I know Khalid could actually relate to. A lot of times when you're listening to the news, you have it on in the background or something, or you might be with family or friends. You hear about something going down, some sort of robbery, and a person got shot or something like that. First thing you think is, don't be black. Don't be black.
Exactly.
Don't be black. And it's true.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you think is, don't be black. Don't be black.
Yep.
And then if you find out it's black, you go, oh, man.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Oh, no.
Yeah. But, if they're not black, you go,
oh, thank goodness. Oh, yes. Okay.
Back to the sweet potatoes,
Yep, it's so true. Oh, wow.
But yeah, the major change, if it ever comes, has to be with white folks. This is one thing that I really hate to bring up, and it's about the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the fact of it is, I myself have been trying to get some sort of animated deal for Curtis for like 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I've done storyboards, I've thought up the stories, everything, and no takers, nowhere. And I have heard so many different ways of saying no. I can make a book out of it. All sorts of excuses, only to see new cartoons put out on the market that really aren't that good.
Great. Exactly.
I'm pretty sure I could have given them a run for the money,
Right.
but it's like, still with all that I've done in my track record, it's still like either they don't trust me or I still have to prove myself. And mind you, I'm trying to prove myself to people who haven't even been in the industry as long as I have. It's just odd.
It is odd, and I've followed kind of your journey on that, Ray, over the years, and even when you want to put out book collections of Curtis, and how come they're not publishing your book collections? And I think at one point I remember you put out your own book collection just because you wanted to do it, and I made sure to buy one and try to give any kind of advice that I could have, because it's so true that it's just like, why won't they do it? And so I don't know what that is, and I don't know if it is a black male child is not as relatable. I don't know if it would be different if Curtis were a girl, or if it's just that I just don't know. I don't understand.
I've had other cartoonists actually telling me, Ray, if you were drawing a white kid, you'd be a lot further along.
Right.
And I said, yes. Oh, here's a little story. When I first met Maury Turner, it was back in the 80s when I was doing my first strip, Looking Fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we had known of each other because we did cartoons for like Ebony magazine. And when we met, we didn't even say anything. We walked toward each other with our arms outstretched. We hugged, and Maury started to cry.
Oh.
I learned that Maury was a crier. So he told me, Ray, if you really want to go anywhere in this business, either draw white children or animals.
Hmm.
And I said, Maury, I can't do that. I have to represent, man. I have to do what feels right to me. He warned me of the trouble I was going to have. I was young. I didn't think all these barriers would still be put up. I thought things were really changing, and to this day, they still really haven't changed. There's so many new venues to do things on. Thank God for the internet, because at least a lot of people who would have not had the privilege to be seen, now they are.
That's right.
They don't have to kiss up and try to win someone's approval.
That's right, because there's so many institutional barriers, and this is what we're talking about when we talk about systemic racism. It exists in publishing, it exists in comics, it exists everywhere. But one of the things, the internet has done is it's opened the door to diversity of voices, which wasn't there, Ray, when you and I were growing up. Maury Turner and Ted Shearer were two of the cartoonists you might see out there in syndication, but Ray Billingsley and a Khalid Birdsong or a Tahid Bondia or a Rob Armstrong or a variety of other cartoonists. It was a closed world, and the internet's opened that up, just like cell phones have made it possible to videotape acts of violence that we were not able to see before.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, was also excluded were the ladies.
Mm-hmm. Right.
At one point, there were no women. Even Dale Messick, he had to use the name Dale, which is sort of like a man.
Yeah.
To get the work put out there. I have no idea why the system was like this. It's like an old man's club. Old white boys club, really.
Yeah. And that kind of breaking through that is still, you wouldn't think it would be that difficult this many years later, but it is.
Something that pleasantly surprised me, a couple of weeks ago, I got an email. I'm on Go Comics, and I got an email from my editor, and she was saying that we would, with everything going on, we want to highlight African American, Black cartoonists on the homepage of the Go Comics site, where they usually are putting all the popular comics and the most famous ones. And would you like to be a part of it? And I was completely in shock. I was impressed, and I thanked them. And now on the Go Comics main page, you see, black cartoonists and their strips up there that you can choose. And so that might seem like a small thing to someone that doesn't, know how it goes. For me, it just felt huge. Like, they're doing this, and it's still up there every day I go. Every day I go and check. Is it still there?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, it's still there. Wow. Okay, I don't know how long it's going to be there, but this is great.
That calls for congratulations.
Right.
Yeah.
But I know also in the back of your mind, you probably said, it's about goddamn time.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly what I said. It's like it's about time, and it's also it's the right time. But I felt like, wow, like this is historical right here, and most people probably won't notice it. But for cartoonists and people that are that know, it's definitely a huge deal.
Everything, it all is a huge deal.
Right.
We've become almost desensitized as a nation, not to really feel about, very much unless it applies to us. But, personally, each person personally, but it is a big deal. And it'll always be a big deal. Just think, a year from now, when they've taken it down, it still had been up there. So, yes, it is a big deal.
It's important too that the audience who goes to the Go Comics page knows that there are African American cartoonists there for them to explore and to broaden their horizons in terms of what they're reading, and in order to understand the world we live in a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's true. And I mean, that was one of the things, just with with Curtis kind of sticking with, okay, we're going to have a Black kid as the main character. I mean, for me, I always want to show Black people doing things that maybe you don't see them doing, or maybe something different, to kind of open your mind, and that's why I have a Black family living in Japan, where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, Black people travel. They go to other countries. They live in other countries. We do all kinds of things, and and I've done that with every kind of comic, and I might not get the attention. It's also hard because it's also Black people, but also Asians, because you have Japanese characters that are in there, and you don't see many comic strips with Asians in them. And so I just feel like for representation, at least it shows that, and maybe it will show someone like, wow, this family's in Japan. They went all the way to Asia, and this is something different. And what's going on here? And just a Black family that loves each other, and and they're there for their kids and everything. And just seeing that is just normal. It's just
Right.
normalizes all of this, where it's like this is just a regular kind of Black family living overseas that happen to have a magical raccoon that lives with them, but still,
Yeah.
it has, like there's some normalization that I'm looking for with the strip. So I hope that more people will, be open to something like that.
Well, just keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Okay. Thanks.
It's your world. If they
Right.
want to come into it, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine too.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
don't ever let it deter you or feel odd about what you're doing. You just keep doing it.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, and just trying to figure out how to make it work. I mean, at first I had a comic strip that was kind of based on my experiences, 2 years in Japan, and kind of doing it more like not a journal comic, but it's closer to that. And then it kind of morphed into the family comic. And so it's not the same kind of thing. And so one thing I've noticed as a cartoonist is just how long things take to shape and form. And I think that, especially on Blockhead, Jeff, you've talked about this, I think, before with Charles Schultz, and how, Peanuts kind of became, it took years to become what it is now. And I try to kind of stay strong with my strip and say that, okay, there are things that don't quite work right now, and I don't know what to do for them, but I have to just keep going and trying this and trying that, and then things may come together one day to really, and it's already coming together. You just don't notice it, but it takes time to really create something that is powerful and and high quality, I think.
Definitely. Definitely.
A strip, I think, that holds its own for a number of years is like the accumulation of all of these little moments, that all come together over a period of time. And as the creator, you don't notice them, but if you have the good fortune to be a reader who goes back and looks at a collection, you can see the development and see how things come together. It's those developments are just gradual, but in a comic strip, it's kind of interesting. The best comic strips, like your own Ray's, Charles Schultz, all of those characters develop slowly, organically over time, and it is kind of a very slow process. It's different than writing for cinema or writing for a novel or something like that, because it's a long-term thing, and so those personalities only grow in increments. It's like Pat Sandy said something not too long ago. It was like writing a novel one sentence at a time, when you're doing a comic strip, and it's something like that. And it seems to me that that's kind of the way it is. Characters develop gradually over the course of many years, it seems to take.
And it's even that idea of, just kind of switching to kind of going off of what's happening now in the world, or what's going on currently. It helps with the characters in some ways, because then I think about, okay, well, how will this character react to this, and how will that character, and then they grow and change and shape again. So I'm having fun thinking about, what is this character like in this situation, just by staying up with what's going on now.
And what you're just talking about is very interesting. Where, sure, these sort of situations and all, they help develop the characters as you do them, but the characters also help to develop you as a person, as an artist, as a creative. It goes back both ways, actually. First time I actually thought of that, now that you brought it up, but I know I'm a very different person because of doing this strip. And Khalid, you probably are also. You've grown probably in ways you didn't even know yet.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I see that, and that's good to hear. Just that idea of, yeah, they're helping us as well, and they're also alive to us, right?
Right.
Of how what they may tell you they're going to say is kind of like, whoa, that was a surprise. And so I do see that of okay, I didn't think about it that way. I have to go into another person's head, and then kind of think a little differently and expand myself.
I think these characters are alive to all of our audiences
Right? True.
because I'm pretty sure you go through this. You get this fan mail who may criticize you or they love your stuff, all because it really spoke to them.
Right.
There may be certain incidences that you've commented on that really touches a person. And I know I, for one, I really see the importance of talking with people when they're so passionate about the strip. Um, Sometimes they go a little bit far,
Right.
in their concerns and all. But it, I think about it and I don't get upset. I say, wow, these people really like the strip. They wouldn't be writing if they didn't. Even if there's something they don't like, they're doing it because they love what they've seen. And,
Yes.
you become a part of their lives. It's a small part, but you're there nonetheless.
Yeah, and I was thinking the one thing that you do well that I'm looking to improve on and grow in is just this idea of, specifics, right? Like kind of honing in on something specific, but also making it general. And I think that is one of the things that I'm looking to improve on. It's just really so because that specific thing you think, oh well, no one's going to relate to this, but somehow you put it in a way that they can, and then they see themselves in that character, in that person, in that situation. I think is kind of a big deal that is a challenge for a cartoonist.
One of the things that comes to mind while you guys are talking here is Ray was talking about how the fans kind of identify with the characters in the strip. And, right now, we don't know what's happening with Mrs. Nelson, Curtis's teacher who's got COVID. And so I'm like on pins and needles waiting to find out what her response is going to be and whether she makes it through or not. I mean, those are the kinds of things you do start, right. You care for these characters and you really begin to feel for them. And if they're gone or they're in danger, you feel something for them. And, it really tugs at the heartstrings. And that's one of the magic moments or elements of working in comics, I think.
Yeah, to make people feel.
Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen to Mrs. Nelson? That's what I want.
Well, I can't tell you guys. I can tell you this. Mrs. Nelson is actually based on my real life third grade teacher. And she was a teacher who first told my parents that I had some sort of autistic talent. And she was the very first person to push me, and I love her dearly.
Is she still with us, or
no? She
passed
not.
away.
Like I said, that was third grade, and she was probably in her 50s then.
Oh, okay.
So I'm pretty sure she's gone. But I just want to leave it with that I love her a lot.
Yeah, that's something about teaching. I'm thinking of Khalid now, who you don't know the impact you have on students, and it's kind of nice to know that she showed up after all these years. She had that kind of impact on you that you would honor her with her depiction in your comic strip. I wonder if she ever knew.
I don't know. If she had family, maybe she knew. But I have to tell you, the strip made its debut in October of '88.
Mm-hmm.
The very first strip was about her and Curtis.
Wow.
The very first strip was about her and Mrs. Nelson, him and Mrs. Nelson, and they had a combative relationship immediately.
Not based on your own, though.
I was scared of Mrs. Nelson. She was a tall woman, very, very grand, very suave. the she was a black woman, and I mean, she had her hair together. She did just what I always depict. She would tug at her glasses when she spoke to you, and during those times, teachers were allowed to discipline you.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Ooh.
physically.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So Mrs. Nelson was a big woman that I used to see yank a kid out of his or her chair and take her in the hallway, and you could hear her yelling. She was a strong woman. So, I mean, she made a real impact on me. I didn't screw up that year. I made sure I passed.
Times have changed in that regard. I had a teacher in first grade who was not shy about, bringing out the palette and whooping your behind,
Yeah.
and I had one, and I used to be a kid who laughed a lot in class. So I remember at Thanksgiving, we were going home early the day before Thanksgiving, and she said, "Now, Jeff, be sure to tell your parents you were a good boy. You didn't get spanked once today."
Mm. Wow.
It's a different world,
Yep.
Yeah.
at least in that regard. I mean, some things don't change, but some things remain the same,
Well, I could now. I know Khalid won't admit to it, but I know he doesn't act upon it. But I'm pretty sure there's some students he wouldn't mind like kicking their behinds.
Oh,
Oh, oh boy.
He
Yeah,
just
it's
can't
it's
do it.
hard. Yeah, you really have to control, but also in just how you speak and everything and all of that. It is hard sometimes, but overall, I mean, I think that teaching and education, it's just like of all the things I've done, I feel like I tend to get the most back from teaching. It's just and sometimes, yeah, I mean, students will say thank you, or they'll come back a few years later after they graduate, and they'll just say, "Oh, like what you taught me about this, and I remember it, and I'll never forget." And you just you can't put a price on those moments. It's amazing. And so even those tough times when you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't take it," it really is kind of worth it to do that. And if you're in the right place, you can laugh a lot. A lot of people don't get that on their jobs, because kids are funny. I mean,
Yeah.
kids are hilarious, and there's a lot of jokes that come from that, a lot of character moments that come from just being in the classroom and seeing what kids do and how they think. So yeah, it's definitely yeah, pretty magical sometimes.
That is
kids,
fantastic.
yeah, kids will keep you young too.
Yes.
Raising kids may make you old, but teaching kids, you know, teaching kids will keep you young to a certain degree. It's and I have to say that my own experience has been a good one in terms of that. I've had some very rewarding moments with young people, and I don't know if you both know the cartoonist Jan Elliott of Stone Soup.
Oh yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, Jan was on a couple of weeks ago, and she had some experience teaching too. She taught a course when she first stepped down from doing daily on Stone Soup to weekly. She taught a course and found it, again, really rewarding. The same thing, you just don't know what kind of impact you're going to have on kids, and sometimes they come back and visit you years later, and they're fondly remembering what you brought to them, and that's kind of a very important, I think, thing that we as teachers kind of take for granted sometimes. But it's a good experience if you can have it. And I know, Ray, you've interacted with so many cartoonists over the years. In a way, you've been a teacher yourself.
Yeah, I try to mentor people whenever they ask for it. Uh, it's not a thing where it's formal or anything, but I try to teach people on the level that they're at,
Hmm.
and just try to uplift them. And so
Mhm.
many of them come to me almost depressed, thinking that their work is no good or anything, and I just try to bring them up to a level that they really like, because everybody deserves to be inspired. No one should be pushed down, especially if there's something they want to do or someone they want to be. So that's my role. I just like to do it, and I've kept in touch with a number of them over the years. One calls me Sensei. He's been calling me that from the beginning. Wow, we've been together about 7 years now, and another one that's been talking with me for about a decade now. They stay in touch, and that part is nice. I do get great feelings from it. Although the only thing is with a lot of mentoring, you don't really get a chance to see what they look like unless they post themselves. But you know, basically, we get to know each other just blindly almost.
Mm.
You know, what we look like, I guess, isn't that important. It's just what they want to do.
I was thinking that also while you were speaking that not only, have you been an exemplar for other cartoonists coming up and in particular for other cartoonists of color coming up because you were, along with Maury Turner and Ted Shearer, you were really groundbreaking in that sense. I mean, Curtis, the strip itself, the fact that you've been doing it consistently and successfully all these years, I think you can't underestimate the importance of that contribution, I think, to younger cartoonists and particularly younger cartoonists of color, to see that you're there and doing it day in and day out and at the level that you do it is, I think, inspiring.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. That's a very kind thing to say. All I could say is my love for the industry just keeps me doing it. I do it for no other reason than just for the love of it. I don't know what life would be like if I didn't draw. My earliest memories are of me drawing.
It just comes natural to you. And this is one of the things that always strikes me about Curtis. Every word in Curtis is written by you. Every drawing is done by you. All of the inking is done by you. In that way, I mean, there's really in comic strips, it's rare that a cartoonist working on a daily comic strip is really in charge of the whole thing, including answering fan mail himself. Yeah. And I mean, that goes even farther than Charles Schultz, who didn't answer. I mean, he did answer fan mail, but he did have a staff of people to help him, with that. But I mean, in that sense, you're a true heir of that mentality that cartooning and comic strips are an art form and a personal expression, and that's what Curtis is. It's a work of personal expression, as is Fried Chicken and Sushi too.
That's what I was gonna comment on that because that's part of what helps keep me going. Just this idea that I can always think back on Ray. It's like if I think, oh, why do I keep doing this? And I should just stop and everything. And I'm like, but Ray's doing it. He's every day, and he's doing it on his own. He's answering all the things that you just listed. I'm just kind of like, yeah, and it's his voice, and he's able to do it. And so, having Ray there is just that constant motivation of knowing that if I'm wondering, then I can just kind of go and look and read a Curtis strip and say, yep, he's doing his thing, and so I can do mine, and that is huge for me, and to have had that as a young person coming up and being able to read his strip and to be able to say yes I can is just it's amazing.
Wow, that's really nice. That is really nice. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things we need to see and haven't seen, and this goes to the question of racism playing out in all kinds of ways in our public life, is that a strip like Curtis still has yet to be acknowledged with, the National Cartoonist Society Award and the Reuben Award, and it deserves it. And it needs to be collected in a variety, a number of collections, great, or one big collection, but there needs to be, some acknowledgement of the quality of work that you've been doing, Ray, for all of these years. And I think it's attributable to something, and I think while overtly there may not be a racist kind of thing expressed overtly, somehow underneath it feels like subtly there is some kind of prejudice at work that keeps the strip from being acknowledged in the way that it needs to be and should be acknowledged.
I sometimes feel that. Unfortunately, sometimes I do feel that. It's especially bad when I'm around a lot of the other ones, and they are supposed to be friends. I think they just overlook me when it comes to certain things, because I am sort of quiet, and reserved. I mean, I've been in the industry so long. I'm not a person that says, "Look at me, look at me." I'm not one of those. I tend to listen more. I listen to people more. I'm in the background more. So I mean, that could be a reason why. I actually need some sort of publicist or somebody with, ice in their blood
Mm-hmm.
that could actually push me. It's just not in me. I'm just not that type of person.
You're at the drawing table.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think that this is the time where it can really work. I mean, if you think about, say, the book I know you know, Ray, New Kid by Jerry Craft, and that is just breaking all the records, and it's just, and that's been huge and a popular book in our household, and just also inspiring. But it shows that kids want to read about black people, and they can read about a black boy, and it's just fine. I think that even just teaching students, and I've lived in many different places, and every time I'm there, and it's usually kindergarten through 8th grade or so, the kids, they just want to read something fun. They really don't care nowadays. I mean, they just want to read great stories and laugh and all of that. They'll read it, and they'll love Curtis just the same as any other thing. And I feel like, like let's just let the audience decide on this. And so yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. This is the time.
It's interesting. I haven't read New Kid, but my first experience of hearing about it was actually my wife does a show. She's a hat maker. And actually, Ray, I meant to tell you this a long time ago. My wife actually makes hats. She's a milliner. And you do all these strips about these big, funny hats,
Yeah.
You're always making fun of the hats. And my wife makes hats that are not too far off from some of those hats. But so it's great, actually. She loves seeing those comics, and so do I. And but anyway, she's doing this craft show. And it's in Westport, Connecticut, which is, fairly well-to-do, primarily white community in Connecticut. And
right.
Actually, Ray, you live in Stamford, so I think it's not too far away from West.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, but it's a pretty rich area, which is why it's a good place to do a show, because we can sell a lot of stuff there, and it's a good audience for the stuff my wife makes. Anyway, it's held in a school. It's held in an what is it, a junior high school kind of combined school. And
well, they just call it middle school now.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I sound like an old man now, but middle school. It's exactly. And it's, by the way, it's like the ritziest, wealthiest middle school I've ever seen. I've never seen it. I mean, these kids have everything. It's amazing. But posters for New Kid were up all over the hallways in that school. And that's how I got introduced to it and found out what it was about, was the posters. And those kids in that school are reading that book and loving that book. And I think it was noted in one of the posters, it was voted #1 on the kids' choices of best new books to read. So it's having an impact even in environments like those.
I can tell you about Jerry. He's been working his behind off for decades.
Mm-hmm.
He was once working in the art department of King Features. So that's when I first met him. But
I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh yeah, he's been at it for a long time, and I watched him through his strip Mama's Boys.
Right, I remember that one. Yep.
I saw him grow up with that, and believe it or not, Jerry also has many other books. He's done a slew of books. New Kid is not the first one.
Okay.
So this success was sort of like in the making for years, because Jerry was the type, he didn't give up. He did one book, and then silently, as no one knew it, all of a sudden he came out with another one, and so on and so on. So I was really happy to see how this one went off for him. I mean, I even posted for him on Instagram, trying to tell the people, this is a great book. Make sure you get this book.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. I didn't realize he worked in the art department at King Features. That's kind of, that's the long way up. actually, right? Through the art department. It takes a while
Right.
sometimes to climb that ladder.
Well, the good thing that I could imagine about working there is that you're exposed to so much artwork.
Oh
You
yeah.
see
Yeah.
all the strips, all of them, and you see them firsthand. And during those days, I guess he was handling a lot of originals,
Mm.
which is almost, not heard of anymore. Everything is on computer, so most people don't even get a chance to touch an original.
Right. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, most people, but you're still working original, Ray. You're still working on paper, right?
I'm a traditionalist,
Yeah.
Okay.
and I wasn't brought up like that. I wish I was better at the computer. Maybe I would do more on the computer, but I'm so comfortable doing it the way I'm doing it. It it's it's natural as breathing.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Now, Khalid, did you begin working traditionally or have you always worked digitally?
I did. Yeah. I'm kind of in between. Like I came up with traditional and always working on paper. And so, for me, I started the original Fried Chicken and Sushi comic strip all on paper with Bristol board and pen and non-photo blue pencil and all of that. And it was great. Like doing the strips that way and scanning them in and then coloring on Photoshop and kind of taking in the computer side that way. But over about 3 or 4 years or so, like I all of this came out with the Wacom Cintiq and also Manga Studio, which is now Clip Studio Paint software for drawing comics, and people just kept talking about it, and so I wanted to give it a try, and I fell in love with it, and so it's just kind of like now I've been all digital, and so it's not the same, you're drawing on basically glass, and so it's very slippery. You don't have the pull of the paper, which I miss, but I do enjoy it just all, that you can do with it, just that you can sketch easily and remove things. And my comics seem to move a little bit faster and I tend to have more fun with it. When I try to go back and work traditionally, it's not
Hmm.
the same. I love to draw with pencil. I still love that feeling and draw and ink on paper. But when it comes to making comics now, I really enjoy the fact that I can just kind of do it all in one program. I can sketch it, draw it, color it all in one, and then boom, pop it online. And so it's been great to experience that. But I think that both are important. I mean, I could definitely go back to doing traditional for a different project one day, but that's because that's kind of how I was raised with it. But yeah, the everything that you can do digitally now is just amazing technology.
And it's had an impact on, I think, just about everything in terms of the way comics are produced. The pens have become so sensitive and to the touch and all of that. It's hard to deny the improvements that have happened since the Wacom first came along and the Wacom pens and all of those. They've just become so much more sensitive. The Apple Pen in particular is just so great and makes such a big difference. But, I was wondering, Khalid, when you first wrote to Ray and he wrote back to you, what kind of advice did he give to you?
Oh no, I'm trying to remember. I mean, I think that it was, a lot of, just keep going and learning, and kind of the idea of learning to draw the human body. That's important, and which was good to hear because you think about even just comic strips and all that. You think, well, I don't need to learn to draw anything that great because I don't have to put a lot of detail in. But that's not true. I mean, like comic strips, comic books, you need to learn to draw everything, and so just that kind of idea of that, it's going to take some time and you're on the right track, keep working and keep growing. And so that was what I needed to hear. And so that's kind of stayed in my mind. And it's even what I teach when I teach students of just like this takes time, but especially if you're making comics, it's important to learn to, the mechanics of how things work and how to draw them. And yeah, to kind of just keep going with it.
Wow. Wow.
One of the things that strikes me when you were saying that, that it takes time, learning to draw takes time, learning to do comics well and a comic strip to develop takes time. And the culture we live in now is so much based on immediate gratification.
That's right.
And finding the time, and in this particular case, I mean, comic strips are kind of an anomaly in the sense that there's no way of getting around the kind of time you've got to put in to create a comic strip that lives. I mean, it takes 5 years for it to really come together.
But do you think so? Do you think so now? Like I wonder, because I'm seeing so many comics on Instagram, which is a great place to put comics. It's kind of my new favorite place to post. And I see so many of these new comics, and they have so many followers, of course, many more than I do. And it's such an easy thing for people to just kind of scroll through and read. And I wonder, are they reading it just because it's funny, or are they fully invested in the comic itself as far as the story and the characters? It seems like people that are putting out this work, it's getting attention so much faster than I believed. Doesn't mean the comic is good, but still, it's exciting in some ways. But it makes me wonder what will become of comics right now.
I had an experience with one of those kids that do a lot of posting, and he had been posting for, I'd say, about 3 years, and had a lot of followers and all. And he happened to self-publish a book, and he wrote to me and he said, "Ray, nobody will buy my book. I have all these followers, but nobody will give me a penny."
Yeah, they're not invested, and they're not fully there. They're just kind of casually reading.
Exactly. I mean, as long as it was free.
Right.
He said, "Now I know who my friends are." I said, "Hey, it's part of the business."
Right.
You can see so much for free that it's almost like, why would they pay for it anymore?
It's interesting. I think Khalid points out, and I think both of you are making really interesting points in that regard. I mean, I'm thinking of different strips that I read on Instagram, some of which have an interesting interaction between the author and the fan base, and the fans really seem to care about the characters. And then there are others where they seem popular, but you don't really get that kind of interaction. I don't know how you find or juggle it, or how you find that sweet spot where you find an audience that's really going to invest themselves. I know, with newspapers and comic strips in the old days, it was so much a part of it. You read the newspaper every day. It came to your house, and the comics page was there, so you got to know the characters in there, and if you read them every day, you just became invested in what happened to them. And so there's a different.
You remember that was the main reason why comics were formed in the first place. It was to help sell papers.
Right.
That's what they were completely about. People would buy certain papers because their favorite characters were in them. It's not even like they were going by headlines most times. It's just about who did they like the most in the strips. And the bad thing is, papers had seemed to forget that. They started taking cartoonists for granted. Yep. And that goes along with magazines, all sorts of print. They seem to forget that, cartooning was actually an important part of them. Now, see, with the internet, the way it's going, I'm not saying that it's not as important, but with so many people just posting and everyone reading it, that's really why a lot of cartoonists aren't making any money.
Right.
I've heard from several people about I'd like to keep doing this, but I'm not making a dime. I have a GoFundMe page and nobody's putting in or anything like that. And it's what Khalid was saying. They're not invested enough to pay any money.
Well, everything's changing, right? It's changing from mass audiences to micro audiences, and I think that's the key. Where I was speaking before about specifics and how now people are looking for that specific thing that speaks to them, and that they know, okay, we've got a lot of choices out here. There's tons of stuff that I can read and get into. I want the thing that's just for me. And so I think that's the challenge of making it a place where you're maybe not going to get millions of people that will buy your work, but that whole 10,000 true fans or 1,000 true fans type idea of, okay, I've got these people that really want what I'm putting out, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people. And so I think that is kind of the shift that's happening now of how do I get the people that really just want the thing that I have, and I'm one of their top choices.
And there's no formula for that. You strike a chord. I mean, in some ways it's still like it was in the old days, in the sense that you either strike a chord or you don't strike a chord with an audience. Finding that niche market is kind of I don't know that you can come up with a formula for it, I guess. And it's interesting. My own experience, I've been doing this comic strip about actresses, working on it for a couple of years.
Yeah,
and every now and again, I still
great.
pull it. And the funny thing is when I first started posting it, I got all of these likes from people in Hollywood, actors, people who were trying to find their way in the business, and writers and things like that, all in the movie business. And I stopped posting for a while, and they, I'm posting other things or whatever, and I never get any interaction from those guys on that stuff. When I post one of the comic strips about the actresses, which I just did a couple of days ago, all of a sudden they crop up out of the woodwork.
Yeah, so it's directly to them. That's it.
Yeah, they're interested in one thing,
Yeah.
But I think the challenge, and it goes back to some of the stuff that we've been talking about today, with all this information coming at us all the time. I mean, the challenge is really to be cognizant and aware, and particularly aware of the things that are of great importance, to us, to be educated about, I mean, there are things like, again, I'm showing my age, but I'm a big Beatles fan, right? So I will go to any post anywhere about Beatles stuff. It doesn't matter what it is, and I've read almost everything there is about them. It doesn't matter. I go back and I read it. It's just like that's my little place of happiness, is in that music.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. So that's great. Wonderful. And it's great that there's a lot of people like me out there who like the same stuff, and we can, kibitz about that. But at the same time, you got to be cognizant of the stuff that really matters. You got to climb out of your comfort zone, and you got to find out about what's happening to other people in the world. You got to educate yourself about what's happening in the government, and you got to know what's happening in the world that, in terms of COVID or whatever issues that are happening, people that are been, devastated in some natural disaster, people need help. You got to be aware of what's going on, or, the way the environment is being impacted, and trying to make changes in the way we live our lives. Paying attention to that stuff is part of the challenge when all of this information is coming at you at such a rapid pace. And so climbing out of that niche is important too,
A lot of what you just spoke about, that shows that you're actually a special type of person.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I find is that a lot of people are closed as to what's going on. The whole fact that people nitpick and choose exactly what they want, or this is just the one for me, shows that they're a little bit closed-minded.
Yeah, they want to stay in their room. That's right.
Yeah, that goes back to like the closing of bookstores, things like that. I used to love to go to bookstores. Now, I'd have a particular book in mind, but there was nothing better than going around and browsing and picking up other thoughts.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Yes.
That is the worst thing about the internet, where you can't browse.
Right.
You could only get that one voice you're looking for. And that's what also makes it so hard about cartooning. That's why the actresses and actors only pick up when you do certain things, because they're not open to the rest of it. And see, that's the bad part.
Right.
We have this big problem with climate change, because it's almost popular to say, of course, I'm against it. But if you get into real specifics about it with people, they don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
And it is because they haven't studied it. It's if it's not in their orbit, they don't really pay it any mind.
Hmm. You're absolutely right. And that analogy to the bookstore, I think, is so important. I'm like you, Ray. I used to love that, going to the bookstore. You just stumble upon, you'd go look for your book, but then, you're browsing and you just stumble upon something that you never maybe thought about before,
Right.
might have to do with, science, or something about the universe, or something about consciousness, or you just don't know what you were going to encounter, philosophy and religion, and you know and too often when we are just clicking from one thing to another, it's just one thread, that's
Right.
following one train of thought.
You even see like on AOL or certain things, it says this was suggested just for you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not great. I don't want somebody telling me what I should read. It's telling you what you should be interested in.
Yeah.
And that's a danger
Yes.
because it starts making you part of a pack.
Yeah.
Right.
And see, when I was coming up, it was all about being an individual
Yep.
and not being afraid to be individual. Now you're almost afraid to be an individual. Notice most people have to be part of whatever's popular. And see that's a danger.
Well, it's interesting. The concept of individuality seems to have changed somewhat since, the period that you're referring to. And, I'm not that much younger than you. So, I've experienced that too. But I think when I think now about all these people who like gather together, those protesters in Michigan at the State House with those rifles, who showed up.
Right.
It's my individual liberty. I don't have to wear a mask. And there's like 40 of them with rifles in the State House, complaining that their individual rights are being trampled on. But that seems to be, to me, a perverted view of what it means to be an individual.
Well, they're a mob. That's the
Yeah.
thing. That's the
Yeah.
mob
That's pretty
mentality.
much it.
Uh, they're only brave like that as long as there's other people behind them. It's
Hmm.
the same thing that gangs used to do, the ones that roam the streets picking on little kids. It's the same mentality.
Yep.
A lot of these people, they wouldn't be as bold if it was just them.
Hmm. Yes. Right. You're probably, or if they didn't have, those assault weapons with them.
True,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if most of those people even know how to use them. It's easy to brandish a gun, but
Right.
do you even know how to shoot them? Do you know the kickback on these things?
Yeah.
You can blow your shoulder out from shooting a rifle wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely, and how dangerous it is, to have them laying around if you don't know how to take care of them.
Oh, there was a story that I read a couple of years back. It made me feel kind of odd because there was a fellow, I think he was Midwest, and he was very definitely sort of prejudiced. I mean, he had a Confederate flag on his truck, and he was teaching. I think his little daughter was either 4, 5, or 6. He took her out to a target range to teach her how to shoot with a rifle. First shot, she shot him and killed him.
Oh,
Wow.
I said, wow, wow, talk about retribution. He
Mm.
said this girl is going to be on a psychiatrist's couch for the rest of her life. All of this just because he wanted to teach her something that she didn't really need to know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm not a gun person. It's not my thing. So it never has been. Never been a part of my family or my upbringing. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for gun advocates. In
What I hate to see people who post themselves hunting.
mm,
Oh yeah, I don't like seeing
They,
that either.
Me
yeah,
neither.
they shot some poor animal and they're standing over him smiling. That
Yeah,
is the worst. I mean, I don't see the pride in that.
yeah. Me neither. Me neither. I'm with you there. Absolutely. You know. So talking about all of this is it's really inspirational in a way for us to be talking here today about all of these issues and hashing it out as it were, because I think these are important discussions, that we have to have. And I'm really glad that we were able to get together to do this today.
Yeah, same here. Thank you for making this happen, Jeff.
Yeah, it's been really great.
Oh,
it sounds like you're about to kick us off.
Oh, heck no. I could go on for another half hour. I just, I mean, it's fine with me, man. If you guys want to keep talking, I'm all up for it. It's because I think the discussion is one that just, it has to go on, and we have to have it. And I think talking about the impact, first of all, just talking about experiences as cartoonists, I think is really important. And and I don't want to underscore well, maybe I do. We're talking about two different generations of cartoonists here. We're talking about, and Ray, I'm not saying you're old, but
believe me, I understand it.
An elder statesman, let's call it that.
I look back, and
what's that?
What? I look back, and actually, I've been in this industry for 51 years.
Man.
Wow.
I've been drawing cartoons for 51 years. So yeah, I am the oldest statesman.
Yeah.
And mind you, at one point, I was a youngster.
Yes.
Yep.
The people, the cartoonists used to call me kid, and they teased me unmercifully. It was almost like older brother, younger brother sort of thing. So you can just think of your top cartoonists. They used to be mean to me.
You were like a prodigy, though.
I, like I said, they treated me like I was the little brother.
Oh, okay.
They didn't see any of that other stuff. This was just someone to pick on. And I mean, I loved it. I was getting, I was being joked about by, Schultz and things like that. It was crazy. It was surreal living.
Wow.
You were.
And let me tell you, you know what? Life for me, it was always like living two lives. Because at one side of my life, I could go do an interview or speak in front of 500 people at the Smithsonian, and then I would come back home to my neighborhood, and my buddies were talking about, putting money together to get a 40 ounce. So, life was always very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't allowed to do a lot of the things that I saw normal kids my age do. I wasn't able to do it. So all this stuff coming from the other cartoonists, I loved it. It made me feel like I belonged somewhere.
Well, it became a community.
Yeah.
For you.
Cartoonists are community.
Yeah.
We're the community. I guess editors, they're their own community. It's funny because you notice that people who do strips tend to hang together, and people who do comic books, superheroes, that sort of genre, they seem to stick together. It's almost like little cliques.
Yeah. Audiences too. The audience seems to do that too.
Sure.
There's the comic strip audience and there's the comic book audience.
Right. That's right. Now, we haven't had many movies about comic strips, except for things like Peanuts. But all the ones with superheroes, you see like the same audience going to. Right. Mm-hmm. It would be sort of interesting to see if there were more movies with comic strips, if there would be that crossover audience. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know either. I know some comic strips do seem to cross the line, seem to bring in some of the comic book audience, a few of them, as you said, Peanuts, obviously, but I'm trying to think now. Boy, when was the last time we saw a comic strip movie?
Well, the bad thing about that is, and this is sort of like narrow sight by producers and all. This is why you keep seeing Peanuts or say like Garfield. They're not putting any money into anything that isn't already proven.
Yeah.
And see, it's a catch-22 because they're not aware that your property might pull in those same money.
Yeah.
Because they're not about who you are or how creative you are. The main thing is about what kind of profit can they make. That's all it is. So doing a Peanuts or a Garfield, they're guaranteed a certain amount of money.
Right. And they won't invest it unless they have that guarantee.
Exactly.
It seems like a miracle almost when something new or different is able to come out and become a success just because of that, where there's so many different people involved in taking a risk with this. And even down to it doesn't have to cost that much to take a chance. Maybe it's a low budget type situation where they're going to try it out. But yeah, when something new is able to come out, it's like, wow, this made it through. And we definitely need more of that coming up soon.
They did that with The Simpsons.
Right, yeah.
Matt was drawing his strip, My Life in Hell.
Right. That's right.
And they wanted to animate that, and he didn't want them to take it.
Hmm.
So he came up with The Simpsons. And they went along with that. And, of course, it took right off. Right. But it's got to be a company. Fox was still fledgling at that time. So it was looking for content.
Right.
So his timing was just perfect. Also, the audience, we were looking for something more than just, say, like Disney.
Yes, and it was in a period of, before The Simpsons, it was kind of the doldrums in animation for a while. And he came along, The Simpsons came along just at the right time for the right audience. It was kind of all these things clicked at once.
Right. Before him, before Homer, you didn't see characters drinking and getting drunk and driving and all that. They broke a lot of molds. And these are the same molds that people are now, once again, sort of scared to do, unless you're like a Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah.
You have to be on that kind of grand scale now, but how do you even get there if they don't give you the chance the first time? They don't even give you the chance to fail at it. And see, that's the bad part.
Yeah, you got to be willing to risk. I think there used to be with every new thing that was put up, whether new comic strips. Well, yeah, in the comic strip business, right? For every 10 comic strips they put out in a period of time during the heyday, only one might connect. But they tried, and they experimented. Now they don't do that. They put you through the paces for a couple of years before they're willing to put it out on the market, and so they whittle it down so that there is really very little experimentation, very little willingness to invest funds that aren't secure right away.
Right.
Well, I hope that is also changing or will continue to change just because of streaming. I really hope that with Netflix is kind of taking the charge on that, and we have others that are doing the same, like Hulu and Amazon Prime Video and that sort of thing, where if we, there are new shows and animated shows that I'm paying attention to where it's something very different, and they have a chance to just try it, to just put the first season out, see how it goes, and you have more diverse characters that are in these shows. And so that shows me, okay, there could be a ray of hope happening here where we have streaming as an option to kind of go that way. So I hope that's where this ends up.
I do too, actually. I think that's where it is going.
Yeah.
But the regular channels, the regular way is not working.
Right. Yeah.
It's being superseded by, YouTube and Netflix and Amazon. And you're right, Khalid. I think that's the hope, is that they are really hungry for product.
Yeah, they are.
They're really hungry. And so, you can put your stuff out there, put together a little, proposal. And there are people there who really want to look at stuff. And, so, there's a chance there. But even still, YouTube is available to everyone who's connected to the internet. And so you can upload stuff, so you can start producing stuff yourself on a small scale and see where it goes. And maybe it will attract an audience and then attract somebody after that. And, thinking about that, obviously both Curtis and Fried Chicken and Sushi would be great to see, in some form on one of those streaming platforms, as well as any place else. But
thanks.
That would be kind of cool to see. I mean, I was just thinking fried chicken and sushi would be a terrific, really kind of a terrific scenario for a movie.
Yeah, I mean, that could totally work.
Just the title alone would get people.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, and they'll be so disappointed when it's not about food. Like, hey, where's the chicken and the sushi? I don't see it. And yeah,
the very best thing about it is that it's not a stereotype,
right?
Because for one, when people would think of sushi, right away it gives them certain ideas, and of course your idea is completely different than what they get by. So I think alone, just the name would have people tuning in.
Right, even fried chicken, where it's kind of like you can make it a stereotype, but whether you like it or not, all Americans love fried chicken, and so it's kind of it really it's clear this is a combination of two things that are different that might not go together, but they actually do go together well, and so yeah.
Well, you know what? The number one thing you got to think about this: chicken is loved everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's some religions that won't let you eat certain beefs or meats or things like that. You can't eat pork with some things. Everybody eats chicken.
Everybody eats chicken. That's true.
Yeah. When the little chicken hatches out of the egg, it probably says, "Oh God, I'm screwed." He knows he's not going to make it.
Oh, that's it for him. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, doomed to a life of whatever. Oh, it's awful. But
you're going to be eaten before you were born as an egg, or eaten afterwards. But either way, you get eaten.
Yeah, one way or the other. There's no avoiding it. And if you're not eaten by human beings, you're eaten by a fox or something else. I live in the country in upstate New York, and the guy across the street from us has chickens. And one of those chickens escaped. They're actually pretty cool, these chickens, watching them walk around the little field around his property. And I didn't grow up in this kind of neighborhood, so this is all kind of new to me. And I'm watching like these 6 chickens walking around, and the highway's right there. This road, it's a very busy road. They stay away from that road. They know not to cross that road.
Oh yeah.
They know, do not go out on the road.
That's great. They know not to cross the road. That's good.
Yep. Whereas my cats don't. I can't let one of my cats out because he doesn't know any better. But the chickens know. But one time one of those chickens did get away, and it ended up in one of our bushes. And now I've got this kind of I'm revealing a little too much here, but I've got this kind of innate fear of birds. So for me to overcome that fear of birds is a bit much. But so this chicken escaped, and it got into one of our bushes, and I didn't want that chicken to go running out in the road. So I had to find a way to overcome my fear and grab this chicken, and put my arms around it and give it back to the lady who lives across the street. And I did. And the thing about the chicken is, I tell you, those chickens are all feathers. There's like,
oh yeah.
They're so much feather. Oh my God. I was like shocked. There's like no chicken here. It looks like a big fat chicken, but it's all feathers.
A lot of times when you see chickens that are in yards and all that, and you see them over and over, they actually get to know you by sight.
Now that I did not.
My grandfather in North Carolina had these types of animals. And I mean, the chickens come right up to you. It's like they're your little pets that you never bring in the house. Only thing you couldn't mess with is a rooster. But I mean, the chickens, they came up to you. The chicks would come to you. Mm-hmm. Of course, mostly they're looking for food. But there's no reason to really fear birds. They're not out.
No, I know. I know. It was something I grew up with, and I don't know why. But I did kind of overcome it. We found a starling, a couple of years ago, who had fallen out of the nest. We kept trying to put it back in the nest, and the mother kept pushing it back out. And so we were able to raise the starling, and that was kind of an interesting experience. This is totally off topic, but But we fed the starling, and and I learned about that. And the starling, it was just great. We called him Cheap because that's what he did. And he ended up like I had my baseball cap on. He'd sit on top of the bill on my baseball cap, and when he wanted food, when he got old enough to fly off on his own, he'd fly up into a tree. And then he wanted food, he'd come screaming down, land on my hat, and scream at me. Till in those days, starlings eat like meat and insects and things, so we'd feed little cat food. Anyway, that got me kind of over it, so I was ready for the chicken. So this is a totally different thing, but anyway, we got kind of way off the topic of fried chicken and sushi, but yeah, chicken is the universal, meat, but it's hard to come by these days. I mean, with COVID, I mean, there's still kind of a meat shortage, so and we've got one dog that won't eat anything but chicken, and so yeah, it's kind of finding chicken has not been easy. Every time we go to the store, they're out. But anyway, that's totally off topic. Let's get back to something else. Now, here's a topic, Ray. I wanted to address this with you, and I know maybe it's an uncomfortable issue, but I feel like I need to get your take on it, and that is you were one of your great mentors was Will Eisner. And you had a great relationship with Will Eisner, and and he was encouraging, although he was also kind of a stern disciplinarian, and we talked about that a little bit. But what we didn't talk about, and I'm curious as to your take on it, is the character of Ebony that's in the Spirit comic strips, which is Ebony is just this overtly racist stereotype, and I mean, how did you ever deal with that with him, or you talked about that?
I actually mentioned it to him. I brought up one of the magazines, and I said, "Will, what's up? What's with this?" And he looked at me. He said, "It was the times." And I said, "Okay, I got you. It's not always. It wasn't the way he was brought up to think. I think it was just the times, and he was caught up with it. During that time, remember, there were very few black images at all.
Right.
And they were all pretty much negative like that. There was no getting around it.
Right.
And,
True.
he is an artist just trying to make a buck. He just went along with it. But he had no malice for the character. If you're really familiar with the character of Ebony, he wasn't really like a slewfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, if you think about an artist like Robert Crumb, he had what was that? Angel Fool McSpade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was a black woman, and I mean, she got crapped on by people. I mean, literally crapped on, and her head was shoved in toilets. That was much more abusive. Will would have never done anything like that. So, like I say, it was just the time.
I have to say, I loved Will Eisner growing up. I loved his work. I mean, he was so influential, and I've read a number of his graphic novels, and I found them, really powerful and moving, and my respect for him is great. But I have to say, looking back on the Spirit comics, I just find it so hard to read, and I know what you're saying about Ebony as a character, but I find it so hard to read those comics, with that character, with that stereotype face all the time. Right. And as like you're saying, those images were prevalent in that period of time, and they crop up in all kinds of ways all over the place in media from that time, and it's still shocking and disturbing. Like when there's a Bing Crosby movie or a Fred Astaire movie comes on, and there are characters in blackface, or I mean, that kind of stuff hits you. It's like it's hard to believe that people of that time didn't know what they were doing, or were unaware of how dehumanizing those images could be.
Right, exactly. I mean, they were comfortable in it, I guess, thinking that blacks would never get the sense to rise up. We're sort of expected just to stay in our place. So they did whatever they wanted.
Right.
Little do they know that actually helped fuel future movements.
Well, yeah, anger and resentment or righteous anger about those kinds of depictions obviously are going to spur some kind of action.
Right.
You know, and I watch those films and I sometimes think about like some of the actors, the black actors in those films, and what they felt like, when they were forced to say the lines that they had to say, and what they thought after the scene was over with, or
Hattie McDaniel actually.
Oh yes.
And she said it was just to make a buck.
Right.
She was one of the highest paid actresses, and she did it because she needed, her bills paid. So she would play the maid. I forgot the actor's name who played the laziest black man, but it was the way he spoke and the way he was so slow in doing things. And then when you see him in real life, he said it was all about the money. Mm-hmm. So it was either not work and starve or take these roles. Yeah. And you got to face it, you still almost see that in some films today. Some of these movies are so bad, they're career killers, but the people take it at the time because, hey, that's 6 weeks of them not working as a waiter.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the system imposed these restrictions, and if you were going to live and survive and make a living, you had to acquiesce or get along, just to get along in a way.
You had to be clever to survive back in those days.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know if you two are familiar with a man named Sam Joyner.
The name
that sounds familiar.
All right. Well, Sam, he was a black cartoonist from back in those same times, and great artwork. He's great artwork. I want you guys to look him up afterwards. But his was sort of the story. He could not sell any work on his own merit. Editors take a look at him and they wouldn't buy his work because he was black. What he had to do was actually get a white friend to take his portfolio around. And he actually sold cartoons, but only through this white fellow. So, I mean, and when he told me the stories, he said he wasn't bitter about it, wasn't bitter about the experiences. It's what he had to do to follow his art.
Yeah. Speaking on that, what you had to do kind of idea, and that's one of the things that keeps me out there, because I feel like, what? I can do this. I'm a black cartoonist that can put his work out online, and from coming up in a time without internet and then seeing what's possible now, and just understanding that, hey, there are a lot of people before me that could not, and now I can. And so this gives me a chance and an opportunity to do this. I mean, how blessed am I to be in a time where it's relatively simple to put your work online? I gotta do it.
Yeah, in that sense, it is a different era, and thank goodness for that, and thank goodness for the internet. But we still have a ways to go.
Yeah,
but yeah, you've got your strip out there. Rob Armstrong's got his strip out there and in the newspapers, and Tawhid Bondia has his strip out there and a big audience, and the diversity of voices, and as Ray pointed out too, the voices of women that were on her. Dale Messick was, her name had to be Dale. I'm not actually sure what her original name was. This is not to say that there weren't African American cartoonists and there weren't female cartoonists working throughout the century of the history of cartooning in the United States. They were, but they just didn't have outlets.
Right.
That's right. That was the only difference, that their voices just weren't heard. The voices were there. They just weren't heard in mass. They probably did things for, say, their churches or special events, things like that. But it must have been a hard way to survive. So it's just for the love of the art, nothing more.
Right. True.
Well, the story of George Harriman, right, is another story where Harriman, his entire adult life as a newspaper cartoonist, he passed for white, and
right.
Because he was of mixed heritage and came from New Orleans, but he was a black cartoonist and the greatest cartoonist of up until Charles Schulz, and we can have that debate as to whether Harriman or Schulz is a greater cartoonist. They're two distinct cartoonists. It's like apples and oranges, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Two different kinds of comic strip. But, I mean, we're talking about one of the founding iconic fathers of the comic strip and one of the greatest. And he's an African American, and he also had to struggle and camouflage himself in his life.
Yeah, I actually read that he wore his hat down to camouflage his hair.
Yeah,
he never let people see his curly hair.
That's right. You know, the book that's out about Harriman is really terrific. I'm trying to, off the top of my head, remember the title of it now. It's sitting on
It's called Crazy.
Yeah, Crazy. It's on my nightstand, and Michael Tisserand, I think, was
that's it. Right.
The author. He's a interesting writer. He's a historian of New Orleans, I think, primarily, and he wrote this book, and he found all kinds of information by going back to New Orleans, looking at records and finding out about Harriman's heritage and the neighborhood that he grew up in and all of that. And it's really filled with all kinds of incredible detail about, you know, black life in New Orleans in the early 20th century and late 19th century. It's really a great book.
Oh, wow.
I read the book, and it goes in a lot deeper than I had expected it. I already knew a lot about George, but this man really opened my eyes to a lot more. And that's the bad part, because we all are very deep as content providers. We're all very deep, but I mean, most of the people don't know us. They don't know what sort of life we had to go through to put this stuff out. You know, it's not always such a happy-go-lucky life. There's a lot to put up with.
Yes. Well, one of the things I loved about that book and the discussion of Harriman was that he began to look at the comics, you know, from the point of view of race, and, you know, all of these subtle jokes and ideas about race, about black and white, and were being played out in Crazy Cat, unbeknownst really to the audience, until Tisserand really wrote this book. I mean, the black community reading the strip would be aware of these things, but the white community had really no idea
what
Harriman was talking about.
Think about the relationship of Itnax, the mouse, and Officer Pup.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my God.
Now, who do you think Ignatz was representing? And remember, he got his behind kicked by the cop all the time.
He sure did. Yep.
Yes.
So yeah, who do you think he's representing? Black folk.
That's it.
And, you know, it's interesting. We're talking about, you know, 1910, 1912, 1914, you know, and what we're talking about in regard to the relationship between the black community and the police officers. You know, it hasn't changed. It's the same.
Right. That's the sad part.
Well, and I think that's why people, when they talk about defund the police and we start having this conversation, the reason is because, you know, the idea is the system was put in place to do what it's doing to black people right from the beginning, that it was built into the structure, and that somehow then you'd have to take it apart right at the roots. And if you're going to have law enforcement, you have to reconfigure and reconsider what that idea is and what it's about, because right now was built to oppress black people.
Yep, that's true. You know, I hope that that whatever, with everything going on here, that people understand that they can do whatever they can to help make change. And like it can be stressful for people if they feel like, well, I'm not doing enough, or I don't feel comfortable going out and protesting or doing that sort of thing. But all of us can do something to help create change, and even if it's comics and comic strips and all of that. But yeah, I hope that we have more people kind of understanding that and being a part of it.
And that sums it up in a nutshell. Just what he said. That's it.
I can't agree more. And actually, Khalid, I'm so glad you said that, because if we're going to wrap this up, I think, wrapping it up on a positive note is really important. And because you can look at what's happened, and depending on what media source people are listening to, it can be characterized positively or negatively. But let's look at it from the positive, and I see it as completely positive. The whole other shit about the looters and all that kind of stuff, we all know what that's about. But the protesting and the action in the streets for change is the first step towards something very positive, and change is what we've got to see happen. And so we all have to work some way or another towards change. And this goes for the white community even more, because those are the people who have to change.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And it's so how do we do that? What are some of the steps that we can do? We can take to make sure that change is something that's going to happen this time.
Yeah, but it can be in your own way, and what you are and can and what you are able to do, and that's what's important to remember.
So if you're an artist, you can put your art out there for change. You can make visuals that work towards change. You can write if you're a writer. If you're a musician, you make music. If you've got the wherewithal, the means, you can contribute money to organizations for change, like the NAACP or the ACLU, or organizations that are working towards change. Black Lives Matter. A number of different organizations out there that will help move this forward, right? So like you're saying, it's all in what you're capable of and what you are comfortable with. But sometimes too, we have to step out of our comfort zone.
That's for sure. Yes.
It will always be a continuing thing. There will be change, no doubt. And we may not live to see this change, but it will always be going on. As we are living nowadays, it's our responsibility, our obligation to be part of those people who do enact the change.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and I think we couldn't end on, I think, a better sentiment than that, Ray. I just think that was so beautifully said, both of you.
Yeah, thanks.
And it's been just so great to talk with you both today. I mean, I really meaningful experience for me. And anytime I get to, Khalid, it's great to connect with you in this way. And we're going to connect again real soon.
That's
and
right.
I'm looking forward to that. But Ray, I just want to say, I'm so happy to have had you on the show again. And I hope that we can do this on a regular basis, because
this is great. No problem.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful. Getting to meet Khalid. I had never thought I would meet this guy. Well aware of work, but I've never heard him. So,
yeah, and this is a dream come true for me. It's just kind of like I can't even believe that I'm here right now. And so it's just, I mean, thank you, Jeff, for sure, and for listening to us and giving us the time to kind of talk about our experiences here. Yeah, it's been kind of, it's been a dream come true. It's been, it's been magnificent. Thank you.
Well, it's just been such a pleasure, and also just so nice to have this ability to come together. We're kind of blessed that we have this opportunity, because I don't think we would have had a chance to do this in any other forum. I mean, on radio or television back in the day. I don't think we would have had a chance to do this, but we can do it here.
Yeah, it's possible now. Yep.
Yes, basically we would have had to travel.
Yeah,
at least two of us would have had to travel.
Yeah, exactly. And so we can do it here from our homes in lockdown during COVID. And anyway, so I guess then this is a great note to wrap it up on. And I again thank you both so much. And you sure you can't tell me what's going to happen to Mrs. Nelson? Right?
No.
I'm gonna have
a scoop. We want that scoop.
I'm gonna have
surprise.
Okay, I'm gonna have to wait to find out. Okay.
Yeah, I'd prefer the surprise myself. I wanna see it when it happens.
Tell you what, you guys get in touch with me when you do find out.
Okay.
You got it.
Absolutely. All right, fellas. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking to
both of you.
Well, that does it. I want to thank Khalid and Ray for such a fascinating discussion that touched so many topics across the last couple of hours. I hope you enjoyed it and found it as interesting as I did. It was a great experience to talk to them both. And I'm going to have to do this kind of thing again where we have more than one person on board at a time. It was a really great experience. I really enjoyed it. So thank you again, Ray. Thank you, Khalid. This was just great. And you can find Khalid's work, Little Fried Chicken and Sushi, at gocomics.com. Just look it up by the title, Little Fried Chicken and Sushi. Or better yet, you can even go to Khalid's website, and that's friedchickenandsushi.com. And there you can not only read the strips and the archive, but you can also read Khalid's blog, which he keeps up with on a pretty regular basis. And of course, Curtis can be found at comicskingdom.com, as well as in your local newspaper. And if they don't have Curtis, well, you give them what for? Give them a call and tell them they don't know what they're missing. Well, that'll do it. We have I've postponed it long enough. John Rose of Snuffy Smith and Barney Google is going to be on board next time. I promise. I've delayed it long enough. I'm sorry for I know if you were looking forward to that episode, I'm sorry it's been delayed by a week, but I did feel like we needed to get this out and on the as it's the airwaves, such as it is, for you to listen to as soon as possible, given the times we live in. But having said that, John Rose is up next week. Hey, follow me on Instagram at GroganJeff, GroganGeoff. And if you are so inclined and of the means, head on over to my Patreon page. That's patreon.com/JeffGrogan, GeoffGrogan. Anything you can contribute to the support of this podcast is greatly appreciated. And until next time, as always, be well, be safe, be happy and healthy, and thanks for listening.